That's just after 5 o'clock. But in the meantime, it is high time we made our way to Monaco again, which I'm sure the sun is shining, and I'm sure they're ever so relaxed and being well looked after. The hospitality here, there and everywhere. But it's still not Worcester. Still not Worcester. But never mind. You enjoy it. All yours.
Thank you very much, Kevin. It's got nothing on Worcester, but we are fresh back from our Michelin-starred lunch. We've had the chopper drop us in just outside the commentary box, which overlooks the short blast between the swimming pool chicane and Rascasse, and directly faces opposite the pit lane, one of the narrowest of the year as well. We are, of course, in Monte Carlo. The sun is shining down on the jewel in Formula One's crown. We've had one practice session already, and ahead of us, over the course of the next hour, we'll have FP2. And up in the commentary box is myself, Harry Benjamin. Down on the ground, keeping her eyes and ears across all 20 garages, it's good afternoon, Rosanna Tennant.
Good afternoon. Yes, it's a busy job I've got, isn't it? Patrolling the pit lane. And I have to say, it's a busy pit lane. Lots of people wandering around, a lot of mechanics standing around watching their cars as we get ready for FP2. And as I spin round, I've got the most incredible vantage point, Harry. I'm standing in the glorious sunshine that you mentioned, about 20 degrees, but I feel like it's hotter than that. If I spin round and look over the track, which then winds its way beneath the pit lane, I can see the grandstand starting to fill up. And Harry, I tell you what, there's a lot of Ferrari fans here willing their drivers on. And of course, Charles Leclerc took the spoils last time out here in Monaco. A Monegasque driver on the top step of the podium. Can it happen again this weekend, Harry? That's what they're hoping.
Well, he certainly kicked things off well, didn't he? Up in the commentary box alongside me is the BBC's F1 correspondent Andrew Benson and Scott Mitchell-Marm from the race. Scott, after FP1, you'd think, oh, Charles Leclerc, Ferrari, looking good, but the tail of his FP1 would suggest otherwise.
The trick will clearly be to rear-end another car early in FP2, get the session off the exact way he needed to. As it turned out in FP1, it got a lot better after that. Difficult start, not the ideal way to get your preparations rolling. But he was looking good, even though he wasn't sounding particularly happy. He was taking a leaf out of Max Verstappen's book.
He certainly was. He biffed into the back of Lance Stroll right at the start of the session. That actually put Stroll out of the session. And then, as Scott was saying, just very pessimistic over the radio. Lots of complaints about the car just being nowhere across the course of a lap around this 3.3 kilometre circuit, just over that. But he did end up P1 ahead of Max Verstappen and Lando Norris, the top three. Now, Scott, we come straight off the back of Imola, where Max Verstappen pipped McLaren to the post. And we talk about this year, it seems like it's been McLaren's year. They have the advantage overall, but it is fine margins. But what are we expecting then for McLaren versus Red Bull when we come to a track like this, very different to Imola?
Very different to pretty much anywhere on the F1 calendar. That's what's so interesting. So actually, McLaren team boss Andrea Stella was talking about this a little bit this morning. He was essentially asked, do you understand why it went away at Imola, why the performance advantage disappeared? And he wanted to correct that notion. He believes it's a misunderstanding, and that he described it as comparing apples and pears, because you have some circuits that have a lot of high-speed corners. That tends to be where Red Bull's stronger, and then other circuits that have slower and medium-speed corners and also bigger time management demands that can favour McLaren. He pointed out here, this is neither an apple nor a pear, it's a peach. So it's very much anyone's game at the moment going into FP2.
Yeah, and I think the undercurrent to Stella's remarks this morning was the undeniably growing tension between McLaren and Red Bull as they compete for this year's World Championship. Stella's mentioned, Scott, hasn't he, a couple of times in press conferences so far, how Red Bull are good at massaging the message, basically. That's not his words, that's my translation of the way he put it. But I think it feels a little bit like it's annoying Stella a bit. He's a very honest, straightforward guy. He's an engineer, and he's probably the most eloquent, possibly the most eloquent spokesperson in the entire sport. And he doesn't really enjoy what Christian Horner likes to get up to, which is to really sort of stick the needle in and twist it as hard as he can to try and wind people up, and which is what led Toto Wolff to famously call him a snapping little terrier at one point. And that's what's happening between McLaren and Red Bull. Red Bull are making many of them, if not most of them, spurious complaints about alleged technical infringements on the McLaren car, none of which have turned out to be true. And Stella's had enough of it, really. But being a polite guy, he's not saying that outright, but that's kind of what he was getting at with those remarks, because what happened in Imola was it was a high-speed circuit like Suzuka, and like Suzuka, Max Verstappen was on pole, and like Suzuka, Max Verstappen won. Stella doesn't see it as anything out of the ordinary, and he gets frustrated that he thinks that other people aren't really properly paying attention and understanding what's going on and seeing through Horner's remarks and Horner's spin as he sees it.
Bit of tension between some team principals. I think we'll take that. Green light on at the end of the pit lane, and it is busy. Rosanna Tennant, where have you found yourself?
Well, I'm just looking at the traffic jam that is building at the end of the pit lane. Quite a few cars eager to get out. We had a little stoppage in FP1, so lost a bit of track time. So I'm sure the teams will be wanting to maximise this session. The cars are now heading down the pit lane, and I think out, because that green light is illuminated, as you say. I'm just watching Lance Stroll's garage, Harry, because you mentioned the coming together of Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin and Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari in FP1. And the way we were talking, it almost sounded like Charles Leclerc was to blame. But actually, the stewards have said that Lance Stroll will get a one-place grid drop for Sunday's Grand Prix. And that's because he was actually told to move out of the way by his team over the radio. But he couldn't hear it, didn't listen. And therefore, he's going to incur a penalty. He's also sustained rear suspension damage and a gearbox change. So at the end of FP1, he was up on the highest jacks. But as I'm talking to you now, the mechanics have just been given the green light to remove the tyre blankets, and the Canadian driver is ready to leave the pits.
Thanks, Rosanna. Yeah, a lot of work for Aston Martin and Lance Stroll then to get up to grips with in this FP2 session. The full part of the statement from the FIA: we considered that car 18, Lance Stroll, was wholly to blame for the collision. Car 16, Charles Leclerc, was not in a position to avoid the collision that took place. In the circumstances, it's a one grid position penalty for Lance Stroll, plus he gets a penalty point which takes him up to 3. You get 12 and you find yourself a ban. Right at the top of the list is actually Max Verstappen. He's got 8 penalty points to his name at the moment, so we'll have a couple drop off at the end of June after they've elapsed their 12-month period. But FP2 then underway, and for those who wish to do a sync up, it's 57 minutes and 36, 35, 34 seconds remaining. And Scott, I think it's worth clearing up as well what we have for this weekend. We've got a bit of a tweak to the rules to try and spice up Sunday's action.
Yes, it's a mandatory 2-stop race this weekend. We've seen 2 stops, we've seen even more aggressive pit stop strategies than that in the past, but that all comes down to circumstance, whether your tyres hold up, what happens during the race, and so on and so forth. And the way that the Monaco Grand Prix has developed over the years, in particular last year, just working how the race played out, it's basically get to the first pit stop, make it in as safe a situation as you can, and then basically just keep it out of the wall, and that's your position until the end of the race. And everything's decided pretty much on Saturday, and then the run to the first corner. The idea is maybe a little bit more out of hope than expectation, is that you can inject an extra variable into things this weekend and try and catch teams off guard, and also if anything does happen during the race, it spices things up. So yeah, 2 mandatory pit stops here.
And if you want to read about 1,000 words on that topic, you can look at the BBC Sport website for something that's just been published recently.
What if I want more like 800 words? Can I go to the race for that
just
one?
Just missed the last 200 off. It's just a quote.
chuck it into any AI tool of your choice and ask it to just summarise.
Are you saying I've overwritten for the second time in 24 hours?
No, not at all. Not at all. Would you like to remind everyone what the first article was that you're very happy about
Oscar
this weekend?
Piastri.
There it is. And if you had a nice sit down with Oscar Piastri, our championship leader, you can read it all on the BBC Sport website, or if you prefer the audio medium, which has 5 live listeners, I'm sure you do, you can listen to it on our Checkered Flag preview show, which is available now to listen to on BBC Sounds and wherever you get your podcast. Jolyon Palmer joined us for that one, but we fully focus on FP2 at the moment, and cars out on track with the exception of Isaac Hadjo, who stayed in the pits. I mentioned Oscar Piastri leads the championship. He's got a 13-point advantage over Lando Norris. Max Verstappen then a further 9 points behind in third. The top 3 covered by 22 points. That is less than a race win. So very much Max Verstappen keeping himself in this fight. We're still early days, only 7 rounds done. George Russell and Charles Leclerc round out the top 5 in the Drivers' Championship. And over in the Constructors, well, it's a slightly different story. McLaren really do have a bit of an advantage, 279 points to their name. Mercedes the next best with 147. Red Bull, Ferrari, Williams in the top 5, best of the rest by quite some margin, 51 points to their name. Ahead of Haas, that is Aston Martin, Racing Bulls, Alpine and Sauber, who lie last in the Constructors, but everybody has at least scored some points at this part of the season.
McLaren might have a little bit more than a bit of an advantage in the Constructors. You've
just trying to
done you put a bit of shine on the Constructors battle.
I think that's my job.
I think now, don't they have 1 point more than Mercedes and Red Bull combined?
That's quick maths, isn't it?
It's proven to be quite a good season so far for McLaren. But
yeah, you are bang on with that.
Monaco is a good place for things to go awry, even if you plan them as best as possible, though. So, and you pointed out, Verstappen is within a race win of the top 2, so if it is an absolute disaster for McLaren, it could all change here.
Yeah, over 100 points clear on McLaren at the top. So doing rather well then, and expecting them to perform well this weekend too. Max Verstappen, though, is the man who currently has the fastest time. The top 7 drivers all out there on the medium tyre, with Max Verstappen's 1:12.9 the quickest.
Please fix your shifts, same problem. Okay, understand.
The return of upshifts in a practice session, not pleasing Max Verstappen, or sometimes it's downshifts. Usually we see that turned around pretty quickly. What is impressive, I have to say, last week as well, we saw it in Imola, and you see it time and time again with Red Bull, is when they do legitimately start on the back foot in a practice session, and Max Verstappen is far from happy, the turnaround that they're able to do in time for Saturday is usually quite remarkable.
Well, this is another chapter of the McLaren Red Bull disappointment, disillusionment, annoyance saga, however you want to put it. Because if you were to ask Andrea Stella, he would say that it's all people aren't looking at practice properly.
Oh, we've got a collision, and that's the Racing Bulls of Isaac Hadjar, who was in the pits. He's just come out and he's clipped the inside wall going into the Nouvelle Chicane. We heard it before we saw it, and it's the rear left that clips it, and that's brought out a red flag. It's immediately deflated the tyre and detached it slightly from the rim. He's come to a slow on the exit. He was last to come out of the pits, and on his first push, unfortunately for the French rookie, he's found himself hitting the barrier and damaging that Racing Bulls.
It's done a bit more than deflate the tyre, I think, Harry. I think it's probably wrecked the rear suspension and probably a few other things as well. Just to finish that point about McLaren, Stella says here's some radio from Hadjar.
Should I try to bring it? Yes.
Let's see if he can bring it back to the pits. Very briefly, he thinks that people are not understanding that in practice sessions Red Bull run different specs than McLaren, and they see from their sort of interpretation of the data, they know what fuel load they're running, what engine mode they're running, that actually Red Bull are more competitive than they look on a Friday, and it's not actually some miracle turnaround by Red Bull, it's just Red Bull are competitive.
Does that do a bit of a disservice though, because they always seem to big up their simulator drivers back in Milton Keynes, don't they?
I don't know whether it's doing a disservice. I'm just telling you that's what Andrea Stella would say. He's got it moving again, Isaac Hadjar.
He has got it moving very slowly, making contact with the inside barrier as you come into the Nouvelle Chicane. The rear left tyre damaged, but he is able to get that with 3 wheels. We are about to hear how it all happened. Out of the tunnel, into the sunlight, downshifts. There it is. There's the hit. It's something I would do playing the F1 game, but when you're in the real thing, it's not something you want to do in the early parts of practice.
The onboard there, was much more of a real thumping sound from the left rear, but the original image we saw in the audio attached from the sort of external mic, you could almost have heard the metal on metal.
Yeah, exactly that.
It's so harsh, and I know you joke about making that error on a game. That's a classic. It's a classic. It's a classic mistake, and it's so easily done. I'm actually surprised we don't see that one made more. That mistake made more. But we also briefly saw, before he kind of composed himself and tried to bring the car back, we saw a little bit of what's becoming a bit of a Hadjar trademark with the hitting of the steering wheel. Said during our FP1 coverage that he's quite emotional and a bit box office, and that's a little bit of an example of it.
Yeah, certainly. He's made it back to the pits though, Rosanna.
The mechanics were waiting for him, but as I was watching them while they waited for him to make his way back in. They all had their arms crossed against their chests and were shaking their heads. So obviously a little bit disappointed at that. He's just being pushed back into the garage, and his teammate Liam Lawson's just made it back as well. So everybody now, I think, back in the pit lane. And I tell you what, Harry, there was a mad dash, because I was thinking at the time, all the mechanics had come across the pit lane, across the fast lane, jumped the Armco, and were watching. I think I mentioned earlier, we got an incredible vantage point in the pit lane, because you can look over the stretch of track that runs up to Rascasse and see the cars. So some of the mechanics were sort of enjoying the spectacle, and suddenly, when the red flag was thrown, they were all running, jumping the Armco, running back into their garages. So I think it caught everyone unawares. But yeah, everyone back safe and sound now, and the mechanics have set to work on sorting out Hadjar's rear left.
Even though he was obviously very frustrated immediately afterwards, good on Hadjar for just having that brief bit of presence of mind to ask the team, actually, should I bring this back? And the team obviously giving him the all clear straight away, because that might not just save his practice session, that could be a huge difference in the rest of his weekend. If it's not terminal suspension damage, if it is just a broken wheel and get that off, new set of tyres on, that's a difference maker for a rookie in Monaco. He's going to have all of his qualifying simulations and a bit of long run work to do as well.
Massively, just as we were really picking him up in FP1 as well, weren't we? Isaac Hadjar, 3 points finishes though so far, has been quite impressive after, as he described it, an embarrassing start to the year with that crash out on the formation lap way back in Melbourne. Has got a bit of good experience here though. He's finished on the podium last year, finished second in Formula 2 during the feature race. That's the longer race they do in Formula 2, on his way to finishing at second in the championship at the end of last year. But after 7 races so far for Isaac Hadjar in the championship, he's up inside the top 14, finished 9th last time out, so hoping to try and build up a bit more momentum for the French rookie. But we'll see how quickly, if they can, get that car back out for this session, which is got the green light, and we are ready to go again with 48 minutes and 18 seconds remaining. And you're just about to hear another look of it, or we're certainly just seeing another replay of Hadjar hitting the inside of that barrier. Max Verstappen, though, before that interlude, fastest ahead of Piastri. Leclerc third, Norris fourth, Russell the top 5 ahead of Hamilton, Tsunoda, Alonso, Albon, Liam Lawson inside that top 10. Nico Hulkenberg is 11th ahead of Pierre Gasly, Franco Colapinto 13th, Carlos Sainz and Oliver Behrman the top 15. Stroll, Antonelli, Bortoletto, Ocon and Hadjar hadn't actually put a lap time on the board, a competitive lap time at least, so currently registered as 20th and last. So we wait to see when or if he emerges.
Wasn't for the lack of trying.
No, he was pushing early doors, wasn't he? And this is Charles Leclerc, the sound on the Ferrari, creeping by Isaac Hadjar. They weren't sure what to do there, whether to overtake. Saw that he is the damaged car, trying to make his way home. Through to back, the left-hander tends to make their way back. So, just coming back to this mandatory second pit stop and the use of the 3 sets of tyres, which come rain or shine, isn't it? If it rains, they've given them an extra set of the wet tyres, so it's very much aimed at having a 2-stop regardless. Is it going to lead to something ridiculous? If you're a Sauber or a Haas that's qualified towards the back, I think Ocon even did it last time out. Pit at the end of lap 1 and then just see what happens.
Someone will probably try it. Yeah, I mean, we don't know is the answer, Harry.
Well, no one seems to know.
Well, because I think there's so many different possibilities. You know, if there's a safety car on lap 1, someone will be definitely tempted to do that. But of course, they've still got to do another stop. But there might not be a safety car on lap 1. There might not be one till lap 50. There might not be one at all. You know, so I think most of them, certainly the front runners, will go into the race with a properly prepared 2-stop strategy and various options that they can use at various points. But some of the ones who have less to lose, then they're going to do something crazy, and it might play out for them, or it might just end up with them at the back of the field for the entire race. We don't know.
It will likely be one of the cars. Verstappen.
I think there was definitely something wrong with their steer-offs. Like, the quality of that was really bad.
Copy that. We'll sort it overnight.
There's no limit to the tiny
perfection.
the tiny details that will irritate Verstappen during a practice session. So on the 2 stops, I think it'll be a car that is generally at the back anyway, a lower midfield car, or it'll be if there's any of the big hitters that qualifies out of position, someone that's down in 15, 16, something like that, you clear that first stop early, ideally if there's a safety car, obviously, but I think if there's a safety car at the start, you're going to see a train of cars coming into the pit lane, especially further back. But it will be interesting, and I think a lot of it will be set by what happens in qualifying, because that will determine what level of gamble you're inclined to take come race day.
And it's not like you can fudge the system really and hedge your bets and try and stay out and not do some kind of stop, because you will be given a penalty if you try and do anything sneaky. 30 seconds the time penalty if you fail to make that second stop, or a disqualification.
But you see, even that is interesting, because a pit stop here is about 25 seconds or so, and it's a 30-second penalty for not taking a pit stop. So you don't have to be a rocket scientist to work out you only need to gain an extra 5 seconds on top of that pit stop time to actually have it pay off to not make a stop. Imagine if someone won the race that way, having made one stop.
Would it be Michael Schumacher scandalous?
Would they be given a 30-second? Who knows? It's like, but I think one of the other corollaries of it, which is not being talked about that much, although a couple of the drivers did mention it yesterday, including George Russell, is that it reintroduces the possibility of drivers actually really trying in the Monaco Grand Prix instead of, cruising around to a lap time to get a designated pit stop. Some of them might have to just go for it, and that could be really exciting.
I hope it is that outcome come Sunday. The one that I don't know if I fear it, but I'm a bit curious to see is on the subject of a 30-second penalty or a 25-second pit stop window. I wouldn't rule out, if you end up with two cars that you can kind of almost manufacture into a position, if you have both of them that have only made one stop, the others have made their second stop, you could conceivably have your two cars at the front because everybody else has made two stops, and then you just leave both cars out. You have the second car create a massive gap, and then it doesn't need to be that the lead car wins the race because they've picked up a penalty because they haven't served their second. Just get the second car to build up a gap of more than 25 seconds. Lead car, sacrifice the second. First car takes the win from their pit stop.
Suddenly you've got a Haas on the top step of the podium before you know it. I mean, it would cause absolute chaos. Furthermore, an additional 30 seconds will be added to the elapsed time of any driver who used only one set of tyres of any specification during the race. That's the wording in the updated regulation for that one. It does go on to say that there is a disqualification as well. Failure to comply with these requirements will result in the disqualification of the relevant driver from the race results unless the race is suspended and cannot be restarted.
So hang on a minute, what's the point of the 30-second rule if you're going to be disqualified anyway?
It does seem to be, so for the Monaco race, each driver must use at least 3 different types of tyre, either dry or wet. If a driver does not use intermediate or wet tyres in the race, they must use at least 2 different slick tyre compounds, of which one must be from the mandatory dry compounds, hard or medium. Unless the race is suspended and cannot be restarted, failure to comply with these requirements will result in the disqualification of the relevant driver from the race results.
So the difference is it's a disqualification if you don't use the different compounds, but it's a 30-second penalty if you just don't make the extra pit stop.
Right.
Because you've got to use 3 sets of tyres, but you don't have to use 3 compounds.
So you could start on a medium, change to the hards, and then you've done your job.
You've done the using
to
the
avoid the
compounds.
disqualification.
Yes, exactly. Yes. But you still then have to make another pit stop, and you can either go on to a third compound or you can use one of the compounds that you've already used.
Intriguing. One for the strategists and up and down the grid. Sunday's going to be... This is the thing. It's already done its job in a way, because none of us know how Sunday's actually going to pan out. It could be nothing in the end, or it could be absolutely everything we dreamed of Monaco being. We'll have to wait and see how it pans out. What it doesn't rule out, though, is that qualifying is still the utmost important around this track. Track position king on a Saturday, and an FP2 where we are going to see even more cars starting to push. Charles Leclerc on the hard tyre, fastest in the first sector, fastest of anybody in the middle sector. DRS flies open and crosses the line to go quickest, a 1:12.103. For the Monegasque in the wall goes the McLaren of Oscar Piastri into Saint-Devote, straight on. Didn't have time to go into the runoff area. He's managed to hit reverse. The red flag comes out immediately. It looks like he's gone straight in, so he's lost his front wing. But outside of that, it looks like he might have got away with that one. He's got it going again and heads up the hill. He's going to have to do a whole lap with no front wing, but straight into the wall at Saint-Devote for Oscar Piastri.
we've talked a lot about Lando Norris and the little mistakes that he's been making under braking. He had a moment as well in FP1 at the same corner. But there's also been a couple of moments today where we've seen Oscar just pushing the limit, just taking it a bit too far. It looked like he got really, really close to the wall on his best lap of the session so far.
Oscar, are you okay?
Yes.
Bring the car back very carefully.
Yeah, copy.
And that's a harsh lesson to learn, but he's got away with it. That could easily have been session over.
This is the sound of it. Piastri then making his way down the start-finish straight, heading towards turn 1.
He's locked up quite early and just not been able to slow it down. And but locked up early enough for it to just not be able to slow the car down, but just late enough for him to be already committed to the corner. So there's no chance for him to dive down the escape road there.
It's quite remarkable, though, that it hasn't gone in far enough to break the suspension. I'm quite surprised by that. You don't normally someone goes in the barrier there, they break a track rod or at least a track rod, and that's the end of that. But somehow he's managed to keep it going, and it appears that the car's unscathed, apart from missing a front wing and a little bit of damage on the nose cone.
Well, I think your assessment there will probably be why the red flags were thrown that quickly, because that is normally a car stuck in the barrier, isn't it? I mean, obviously there's still a front wing to extract safely, but that's it just shows that they're ready for anything here in Monaco, because they have to be. But I don't think anybody expected Piastri to get the car out and back going again that quickly.
No, but he's made it back to the pits and he's heading towards Rosanna.
Yeah, and a little bit of debris just flew off the car as he came into the pit box. That was really weird. It flew into the Ferrari garage, and the mechanics are straight to the front of the McLaren, having a little look at what's left, I guess, of the front wing, removing the remnants. I think there we go. Yeah, I think it got stuck maybe underneath. Tricky for me to see, actually. It's been turned on the diagonal away from me, but the McLaren mechanics are quick to bring out a new front wing, pushing cameramen out of their way. Of course, number one priority is get the car sorted, not get the shot. And the mechanics are bolting it back on now. So he hasn't even been pushed back into the garage. His teammate Lando Norris, however, has been. But it's interesting to note, McLaren had to wait with Lando for quite some time because everyone else was piling into the pits. And there's sort of an advantage / a disadvantage to being first in the pit lane here in Monaco. You kind of can get all caught up in traffic, can't you, Harry, when it comes to the race itself. So interesting to see that it's already playing a little bit of a card in the practice sessions as well, with how you manage bringing your cars in and out of the garages.
Yeah, it is an incredibly tight pit lane, as you say. They reduced the pit lane speed here for Monaco from 80 down to 60 kilometres an hour. Pit loss just under 20 seconds. If you get a safety car or a VSC, it's around 14 to 15 seconds, depending on how quick your pit stops are up and down the grid. So sometimes in the race, if you do get a safety car, depending on where you are on track, it's maybe more beneficial to go another lap and lose the time behind the safety car, but then to come into the pit so it's a little quieter. But we will get this session resumed at 5:24 local time, coming in from race controls. That's in a couple of minutes. Is this one of the first big mistakes? Oh no, Piastri right at the start in Melbourne when he slid off in the grass. But I mean, that was weather-induced, one could argue. Is this one of the first kind of driver error in a dry session?
Well, it's the first one, I think, that he's done since Melbourne, although I think he definitely made an error. Here's Verstappen's radio.
Mate, unbelievable, these guys, so dangerous.
He came across some...
I know it's only practice, but for me that's just unacceptable. That kind of impeding, it's so dangerous in that swimming pool.
It's funny, he came across some cars in the swimming pool areas, he said, and one of those cars that he's complaining about was his own teammate. The other one was a Sauber. I didn't quite catch.
Well, it's his mate, Bortoletto, he came across earlier today in the swimming pool section as well. So you do just absolutely rattle through there.
Yeah, so on that Piastri point, he obviously wasn't this kind of mistake, but he obviously made a mistake at the start in Imola by braking too early and allowing Verstappen to go around his outside into turn one, and that decided the race win probably. You know, he probably could have held Verstappen off, I think, if he kept the lead at that point, but he didn't. And so, other than that, he's not really done any. But the other thing it does is illustrate just how important it is and how demanding it is for the drivers in Monaco and how much they have to concentrate. I was talking to Pedro de la Rosa earlier today, the Aston Martin ambassador who used to be a Formula 1 driver. We were talking about Fernando Alonso, it won't surprise you. But he told me a little anecdote. He said he was having dinner with Alonso on Wednesday night, and he could tell that he was already in Monaco mode because he was just a bit quieter and not fully relaxed, because his head was already in that space of this weekend serious. And as Pedro put it, you can't F about at Monaco. And this is an illustration of just how early in the weekend those demands are made of the drivers. They all realise we get blasé about it, but these guys know that what they're going through this weekend is as serious as it gets, and one tiny slip up can wreck their entire weekend. And Fernando Alonso has been around for a quarter of a century in Formula One, and one of the greatest drivers of all time, and yet there he is at dinner with his mates on Wednesday night, and even he's feeling it even then.
Two-time pole sitter around here, two-time winner. Clearly no fun for dinner with Pedro de la Rosa on a Wednesday night, but he wasn't having another bottle of wine. Pedro wanted one. I am also just hearing confirmation in my ear that is the first big crash Oscar Piastri has had since talking to Andrew Benson. So can confirm that live on air. For more information on that, let's head down to the pits. Rosanna Tennant.
That's a classic. Commentator's curse really playing a part in Oscar Piastri's weekend. He is still in the garage at the moment. His teammate Lando Norris has headed out. But talking about the demands and the pressure of this circuit for the drivers, Lando Norris saying yesterday, he just doesn't smile when he's driving this track. And I think some drivers do smile a little bit when they're taking on the circuits that we visit around the world. But he said here it's just impossible. You get to the end of the lap and it's almost a case of breathing. Remembering to breathe at the end of the lap is so intense. Just an update from Racing Bull for you, Harry, as well. Isaac Hadjar, of course, was the one who brought out the first red flag a few moments ago, prior to the one that Piastri did. It says he touched the wall, but we're checking the damage now, looking into fixing what's possible to send him out again. So we may or may not see Hadjar out for the rest of the session. I'll keep you posted.
I think actually, Rosanna, he's just gone out.
Is he out?
Yeah, he's just gone out. Just gone out.
This pit lane, it's tricky to run up and down.
We won't hold it against you. He's only just. Okay.
Well, watch out! Don't hit another wall, Isaac.
Well, you've done it now, haven't you, Rosanna?
Yeah.
He's on an outlap at the moment. We're actually just watching Kimi Antonelli. That's the sound you can hear, making his way down towards the hairpin through the right-hander, and then it slightly kinks left, and he almost loses the rear. No grip for the Italian rookie. Just has to ease off the throttle and slow down and make his way through. Antonelli coming up in third, though, almost half a second adrift from Charles Leclerc. And it was interesting, Scott, I don't know what Kimi Antonelli was saying after Imola. It's a big weekend for him, a proper home race, being born in Bologna. Disappointing qualifying, and unfortunately the race in the end was a throttle issue that put him out of it. But I found it quite interesting that he clearly didn't deal with it that well in terms of blocking out the off-track noise.
It was always going to be a big weekend for him for the reasons you mentioned, and everybody, as Mercedes boss Toto Wolff put it, wanted a piece of Kimi on the basically through the event. Friends, family, people that have supported him for a while, school friends, people that have played in sports clubs and everything. And the energy and the distraction effectively was much more than Antonelli had expected it to be, and he admits by the way that Wolff described it, that by Friday already Antonelli was toast. And Antonelli said that he could feel that in the car, could feel that the energy, the focus wasn't there as it normally needs to be. So a lesson learned the hard way, because it manifested in his most disappointing performance of the season so far. Not his worst qualifying result, it was worse in Australia, but he was only 13th, expected more. Can't do anything about the race result. It was actually going to be quite a decent race result with the way that the race was playing out, and a well-timed virtual safety car. Ended in his first F1 retirement, which is just sort of completed the set, but it wasn't actually attached to the stuff he was complaining about. But interesting to hear Toto Wolff talking earlier today in the FIA press conference about that, and shouldering some of the blame from a Mercedes point of view, saying it's a mistake that they won't make again.
Well, Scott, what's interesting about that is that after Antonelli got pole at the sprint race in Miami, I happened to go down to the Mercedes tent, motorhome, whatever you want to call it, in the Miami paddock on the pitch there. And I spoke to Toto, and he was making that point that he was worried about Imola, which was the next race 2 weeks' time, about how much strain it might put on Antonelli. So it's interesting that even though he was worried about it beforehand, they still couldn't do enough to keep that pressure off him.
Well, he invited all of his schoolmates, didn't he, on the Thursday, and as much as we all love that, it's those little things, I suppose. I think Jacques Villeneuve said in a quote that you don't invite this is your office. You don't invite your friends to your office.
You've invited me here.
It's a good point. Being well on track, it's 2010 all over
colleagues
again.
at the most, come on.
Here's Gasly's radio.
Was that our starting gun almost put me in the wall?
Okay.
Yeah, that was Pierre Gasly, not very happy with the Aston Martin in front of him. I think that was Lance Stroll making their way up towards Massenet Casino Square. It is getting, there's been a few close calls over the last lap or so. Lewis Hamilton's been running well out there. He's actually fastest now, 1:12.0, just over half a tenth of a second clear of Fernando Alonso, who set that lap time on a set of the soft tyre. Then Charles Leclerc is out there on the hard tyre at the moment. 3 laps completed. He's on an out lap, and he's in the top 3, but he set that third quickest time on the soft, but now back out there on the hard.
No, that's his earlier time. And he's just put the softs on for his quali run.
Oh, has he?
That's what Alonso's done, I think, to go second in the Aston Martin.
That would make more sense. Thank you. Carlos Sainz out there as well, making his way through the hairpin. We were speaking about them, if you were with us in FP1, about how brilliant the rise it's been for Williams this year. 2 strong drivers that can both capably challenge for the points. And it's interesting, Carlos Sainz, I think, said right at the start he wanted 5 to 10 races to fully learn the car. Well, we're at round number 8 now. He's had a couple of points finishes, and he does feel like he's settled in there.
He certainly seems to have got over that early struggle to adapt. I think there's a tendency with this Williams to be quite tricky in long corners with braking zones that require a bit of steering input while you're braking at the same time. It tends to induce a bit of instability. Albon knows that trait, has been in the Williams for as long as he's been there, and has learned to kind of drive around that. Sainz coming in with the style that he's honed recently at Ferrari was actually instigating more problems with that, struggling especially in qualifying when you're laying everything on the line. He's adjusted around that. He's a hard worker, is Sainz, very intelligent, very good driver, and we're starting to see the best of him now, which is why he's been properly in the mix the last few races, despite actually being disappointed with the results in Miami and Imola, where he could have achieved even more. Charles Leclerc has actually hit a bit of I don't know what that was, whether that was some kind of paper bag or something. It's got stuck in his front wing.
Yeah, it sort of lodged itself. This is the sound of Esteban Ocon. What are we going to see here? Being blocked by the Red Bull coming into the swimming pool chicane.
What is he doing?
He's getting in your way, Esteban, yes. By the way, Oscar Piastri, an update on him. He's already back out on track in the McLaren. He's just gone 4th fastest in that car on soft tyres. And Fernando Alonso has actually just gone fastest, improving his time on his second lap on the soft tyre, interestingly. Was I hearing a conversation, Scott, with you in the press room where someone was saying that Leclerc did 26 laps on the soft tyre in P1 this morning or something like that?
Oh, if that conversation happened and I was part of it, and you were paying more attention to it than I was, Andrew, I'm sorry.
You eavesdropping, you eavesdropping as usual.
Well, he's sitting in front of me, you see. So.
Well, Charles Leclerc is out there on the soft tyre and absolutely rapid right now. Fastest of anybody in the first sector. Fastest of anybody in the middle sector is Alonso, who currently has the fastest time. It's a 1:11.890. But Charles Leclerc looks set to surpass that out of Anthony Nogues. The DRS flies open down the start-finish straight, heads to the line, and goes fastest by over 4.5 tenths.
On this subject of Charles Leclerc being fast, actually, this is another Andrea Stella reference and about reality. Charles Leclerc's been like Mr. Morbid all week about how bad Ferrari are going to be at Monaco, but I wasn't at this Stella briefing this morning that I think Scott was at. But didn't he say I wouldn't be surprised to see Leclerc in the Ferrari quickest?
He did.
Yeah.
He absolutely did. And when we were in the press conference yesterday, I asked a question to Charles and said to him, because he was being so doom and gloom about everything, and I said, but you say that slow speed corners are the weakness, and I know that it's all slow speed here, but it's also the first time this season where you can focus the car entirely on that rather than make compromises. And it was almost like that was the first time the thought had occurred to him, although he did admit, that's one of the question marks we've had. So I think there's a little bit of talking about during our FP1 coverage, the Ferrari perhaps in a much happier place here, because it's all they have to focus on it with the car, and also just the absolute best of Leclerc, because he's just on rails around a circuit like this.
Is he the boy that cried wolf so far this weekend?
Well, look, it's only Friday practice, so let's not get carried away with ourselves. But Lewis Hamilton's just gone through Saint-Devote with a bit of oversteer on the exit there, flirting with the barriers as he starts his soft tyre run on the soft tyre run in the Ferrari. Harry, do you want to take us through the rest of it as he heads down to Mirabeau?
Yeah, making his way, skirts back to the left-hand side, takes the racing line, struggles to get the car turned into the right. I think he's backed off straight away as well as he comes
like a little
look
up. Looked like a little lock up there, right front, just as he was trying to get the front in. The lap had started ideally, as Andrew pointed out, so that was maybe Lewis just trying to buy back a little bit of time that was already lost. He's had a bit of a tendency of doing that in this era of car the last 2 or 3 years, just asking a bit too much on the brakes. But if there's a time to do it, it is during practice. He'll want to get that quali run banked if he can on the soft. At the moment, it is still on that the medium tyre is the best time that he's set so far, 6/10 off what Leclerc's managed on the softs. And it was interesting actually coming into this weekend with Leclerc and Hamilton, with Leclerc being so doom and gloom, and Hamilton was actually being really optimistic and bouncy after obviously a good Imola Sunday and an Imola weekend where he was generally more competitive relative to Leclerc, even though the Ferrari pace had nosedived in qualifying. But I think a lot of that was rooted in the fact that Leclerc knows what this car's been capable of in the past, so has a reference for how bad it's been at its worst this year, whereas Hamilton has almost had a bit of blissful ignorance about what to expect coming here. But as you can see now, Leclerc looks like he's actually going to go faster again at the moment at the end of this lap.
Into Raskas, right-hander, easy on the throttle, try and straight up the steering wheel before you go up and over it. Anthony Noakes, the right-hander, feeds you out on the start-finish straight. Bit of traffic ahead, but nothing too untoward. Loses a bit of time in that final sector, but overall extends his advantage. 1:11.355 as Lando Norris comes across the line to get within half a second of the Ferrari. What's Max Verstappen got to? He's on the soft tyre, coming through Anthony Noakes now. That front left gets so close to the barrier on the exit. He's currently down in 14th. It's enough to get him up to 7th, but he's still almost 8/10 adrift on that last run.
Nowhere near, and he's slower than Hamilton and Sainz the times that they've done on the medium tyre, so the Red Bulls looking very uncompetitive. Tsunoda's just jumped up to 10th, just over a tenth of a second slower than Verstappen. Not to put Tsunoda down, but usually if he's a tenth or so away from Max, you would expect there to be a little bit more in the car. That was about where they were come Friday practice in Monaco. Maybe we're just seeing recent history repeat itself with Red Bull just having a tricky Friday.
Quite possibly. Now, we're just getting another look. I thought I spotted this live. Ollie Behrman just touching the wall with his rear ride on the exit of the swimming pool chicane. Fine margins, though, for Ollie Behrman making his way around there. He's currently in 13th at the moment. It's 22 minutes and 51 seconds remain of free practice 2. Charles Leclerc currently the fastest for Ferrari with a 1:11.3 over 4.5 tenths clear of Lando Norris. Then it's Alonso in 3rd ahead of Albon. Hamilton rounds out the top 5. Sainz is 6th ahead of Verstappen. Piastri 8th, followed by Hülkenberg. Then comes Yuki Tsunoda to round out the top 10. It's Russell, Lawson, Behrman, Antonelli, Gasly the top 15. Bortoletto, Ocon, Hadjar, Stroll and Colapinto the 20 drivers. But we're seeing fast laps being put in at this stage. Oscar Piastri, though, losing a lot of time in that final sector. Had to weave his way through a bit of traffic as well. Did the Australian, who has already had a coming together with the wall in this session. He's down in 8th.
Charles Leclerc's in a class of 1 at the moment in this session. It's half a second to the good in front of Norris, and then the same gap basically covers the next 10 cars. So Leclerc's absolutely dialed in, and I wonder if this is a repeat of what we've seen Ferrari do in the past. They know that the car maybe is lacking overall, or not maybe, is definitely lacking overall performance in normal conditions, but Monaco is not normal. Are they putting absolutely everything into qualifying prep? Are they running everything much, much closer to where the car will be in Q3 tomorrow, so that the drivers have every bit of confidence possible? Hamilton's finally got his lap on the board, and he's gone 3rd, fractionally slower than Norris, half a second off Leclerc, but it's looking good for Ferrari.
It certainly is. Let's see what they come out with over the course of the next 20 minutes. Verstappen's out there again. Fernando Alonso's time up there in the top 4 as well. Aston Martin brought some upgrades last week too. Are we seeing a genuine pace improvement from them? Could this be the weekend that Fernando Alonso scores his first points of the season as Verstappen? Skirts the advertising on the exit through the left-hander, approaching the swimming pool chicane. Manages to get through it, but that was close for Verstappen. Alonso, Red Bull, Alonso and Aston Martin, I should say. Andrew, you want to talk about that?
I'm not sure that I do, frankly, but I think all I would say is, first of all, A, it's Friday practice, B, Fernando Alonso is really quite good around Monaco, and C, Fernando Alonso also tends to get to the limit of the car quicker than other people.
But was that upgrade genuine? Their pace improvement last week, genuine?
Step forward, but not when you look at the numbers. Actually, I did write about this, but the percentage, it was their best qualifying performance of the year in percentage terms compared to pole position, but only by a tiny fraction compared to Japan, and another tiny fraction again compared to Jeddah, both of which are high-speed circuits like Imola. Those are the sort of circuits that the Aston Martin has been least bad at, so I think we just have to give it a bit more time. But it is looking encouraging for Alonso, actually, I have to say. Fourth fastest this time in P2 in Monaco.
And if you look at elsewhere in the top 10, Alex Albon's just behind him in 5th in the Williams. The other Williams, Carlos Sainz, is 8th. Ollie Behrman's up in 10th in the Haas. That midfield is so tight, and you have a couple of bigger cars underperforming at the moment. Verstappen, Russell, Piastri lower down than you might expect. There are opportunities here when you are pushing everything to the limit and getting it right. Plus, if some teams are putting a bit more on the line right now in the build-up to qualifying, that will be showing in the gaps. But it's a great effort from Alonso so far. Clearly, the key is to go to dinner with Pedro de la Rosa and not have a very good time.
Also worth pointing out that his teammate is 9/10 slower than him, down in 19th place. So here's Alonso in the top.
He's doing 10. It's so distracting. Why they miss the corner? Why is you allowed to? I mean,
turn 10, is that the harbour front chicane?
It's coming through the Nouvelle chicane.
It's ironic that he's talking about no one doing the harbour front chicane, and we have a replay of him doing exactly that.
I think he missed it because I think he got distracted by the cars ahead of him who were just driving straight through it, which is...
It's a tactic to get out of the way, because you're not worried that you're going to block them on the entry to the chicane, but you're worried that you need to get out of their way quickly. So what the drivers tend to do is skip over the chicane, and then it gives them time to then move to the left on the exit, so that then the faster car that's on a push lap can go past before you get to the back, basically the following left-hander. I suspect that we'd have had just an irate radio message from Fernando if he'd got blocked through that corner rather than the car taking evasive action. But we saw it a couple of times in FP1. I think Verstappen and Hamilton were catching cars in particularly awkward places, and we've heard it from Verstappen as well coming through the swimming pool section in FP2. If you catch them at the wrong time, you're so locked in on a track like this in particular. Any car doing anything even slightly out of the ordinary is a distraction, and Alonso's just given us an example of it there.
George Russell coming into the tunnel, looking a little bit squirrely on the rear of that Mercedes. Comes out of the tunnel into the braking zone as Liam Lawson's just popped up into 3rd spot on the soft side for the Racing Bulls.
Where's that come from?
Just over 4.5 tenths away from Charles Leclerc. Welcome to the club, Liam Lawson. Where have you been? He's up there. Russell down on time at the moment in that middle sector, and having just seen a gaggle of quick runs, and now the pit lane starting to get busy, as we'll also try and gather a bit of long run data. This is the sound on board Liam Lawson on a build-up lap, just trying to find his way through the hairpin. Gets rather blocked by Hamilton.
yeah, mate, these guys. Lewis, I don't know.
Yeah, traffic paradise there.
That was a Yuki Tsunoda quote, wasn't it, when he was at that team? Clearly having a long-lasting influence over them. And Charles Leclerc through Sandoval, apparently 4 centimetres away from the wall.
That lap, he did a 1:11.366, which is barely slower than his very best lap so far, 11 thousandths of a second slower. Now, Hamilton's just gone a tenth off his teammate. Norris has trimmed the gap a little bit, but he's still 3 tenths adrift. For an event that Leclerc was absolutely dreading, this is coming together very nicely so far for Ferrari, with the very big caveat that it is only FP2.
Ferrari looking good then in this free practice 2 session. It's Charles Leclerc who tops it, a 10th clear of his teammate Lewis Hamilton. Lando Norris up there in 3rd. Liam Lawson with a good lap in the Racing Bulls up in 4th. He's so far been overshadowed by his rookie teammate Isaac Hadjar, but Hadjar, an early crash for him in this session, finding the wall on the inside of the Nouvelle chicane, which is where he comes through now, turns 11 and 12, makes his way much cleaner this time through to back, which almost glides you out. It invites you to hit the wall on the exit. You've got to try and keep it between the walls through the swimming pool chicane. The right-hander of Raskas, the bar on the inside. Anthony Nogues, the final corner, named after the man who had an idea for a race in Monaco back in 1929. Hadjar crosses the line down in 16th. But it's Leclerc, Hamilton, Norris, Lawson, Alonso the top 5, Albon, Antonelli, Verstappen, Tsunoda, Russell the top 10, Sainz is 11th ahead of Oscar Piastri, Bortoletto, Behrman, Hulkenberg the top 15, Hadjar is 16th ahead of Gasly, Stroll down in 18th ahead of Esteban Ocon, and Franco Colapinto. I haven't actually seen too much of Colapinto so far this session. Down in 20th, he has been out there, he's done 20 laps out there, but comes back as Piastri goes fastest in the middle sector. I suppose it comes back to what we were discussing in FP1, Scott, about obviously off the back, both for him and Tsunoda, off the back of some big collisions in Imola. This is not the weekend you want to come to.
No, you need to be fully at one with the car, and Colapinto is not at one with the car because he barely knows it. He drove it for the first time at Imola last weekend and had that big crash. So he is building up, but he's too far off at the moment. He's 2 seconds adrift. He has completed laps on the soft. I don't want to say he's done a representative lap. That gap feels a bit too big, even for a driver that's learning the car. He's a second off Pierre Gasly, his teammate.
Yeah, so just to add some context to this, so Oscar Piastri's just gone third fastest in the McLaren. He's 0.318 off the pace of Charles Leclerc, but that was on a set of tyres that was 11 laps old. So this is why we can't take this as read. Obviously, Liam Lawson's not going to qualify 5th in the Racing Bulls unless the world turns upside down overnight. And so we've got to be really careful about what we're seeing here and what we extrapolate from it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, and I think it's also an indicator of just how much the track can ramp up through the course of not just the weekend but a single session. I think Alonso was actually talking about this on Thursday, that with the way that each run is different, it almost doesn't matter early in the weekend what tyre compound you put on. You could be on a slower tyre but do a faster lap time because the track's so much quicker. So yeah, there are more caveats than usual on Friday, but at least we are seeing a hell of a lot of qualifying work being done, and it's getting very interesting at the front.
They have, I don't know how much of a factor this plays into it, but they have resurfaced half the track ahead of this weekend, from Massenet all the way through to back, to kind of match the other half of the track. So it should be a fully smooth track, no difference in abrasion throughout the circuit. So I wonder how much of that is playing a factor into the track ramping up over time.
Don't forget, we also spent most of FP1 clearing up all of the debris from wild nights out like your own after last night, because the track does become the scene of a party basically on Thursday evening. You
confused me with Andrew Benson, Scott.
Of course, no. You were living it up on a yacht.
Yes, no. I was being very, very polite with my party.
You were living.
It was Benson who took to the streets.
You were absolutely painting the town red.
I wasn't even in Monaco last night. I was in Monaco late.
Well, how far did you go?
Writing up my Oscar Piastri interview, which you can read on the BBC Sport website. In case I've not mentioned that already. But I then drove back to Nice as quickly as I could within the speed limits, obviously, to meet producer Paddy for a very pleasant dinner in a little Sicilian restaurant down the road from our hotel.
Was it pleasant? Can you confirm? Oh, there's a nod. There's a nod from producer Paddy. There we go. Fair enough. Back to the on-track action. Piastri, fastest of anybody in the middle sector, coming to the line now, finds time. Less than half a tenth of a second, 38 thousandths of a second, splitting him and Charles Leclerc. Piastri up to second.
He is still not on Leclerc's level in the first sector. So when we saw, Isaac Hadjar's had a wall hit.
Front left, he's making his way now towards Portier, but the hit has come quicker. It looks like he's picked up a bit of advertising hoarding that's wrapped itself around the front left tyre, and it's actually come off.
No. Is the car crabbing? It is. He's
had a big hit with the wall, Hadjar. That's 2 hits in one session. The car is crabbing, some sort of suspension damage. He's clearly had incident with the front left. It's peeled itself off, and now he makes his way down, and the rear left as well.
It's the same wheel that he hit against the barrier at the Nouvelle Chicane. He's hit it against another barrier somewhere else on this lap, I think.
See the damage as well on the front wingers.
Yeah.
So he's obviously...
It's the left-hand side of the car.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't. I got it slightly wrong when I thought that Leclerc had nosed into a barrier rather than rear-ended Lance Stroll. Here's Hadjar's radio.
Man, I am so stupid. I think I'm just dumb.
He is rather hard on himself, is Isaac Hadjar. We haven't seen how that happened yet, but that is two big incidents in the same practice session, and for a rookie racing around Monaco for the first time in a Formula One car, you do not want that.
That's such a shame, because look at the times. He's basically matched Lawson. He's got back up half a second off the pace in P6. Great recovery from hitting the wall so early on in the session. Got basically that completely out of his head, confident clearly to do a lap time like that quick in FP2 as a rookie here in Monaco. Both him and Lawson actually haven't driven this track in Formula One cars, and he's undone all of that because he's now got to shake this off again for FP3 tomorrow. And you see, you hear rather, what we were talking about earlier, what we were talking about in FP1, radio messages sometimes. Not to say it's a weakness, but he is very emotive. You know, he expresses himself like that. There's a bit of Charles Leclerc, Lando Norris in there, isn't there, with the amount of self-criticism he wants to give, especially when you call yourself stupid. But we're seeing the incident for the first time, Harry. Yeah,
well, we'll come down to Rosanna in a moment, but we're just going to see how it happened. Comes into Saint-Devote, loses the rear, hits the rear left into the exit on the barrier, picks up a bit of the advertising on the front left as well, and that was all she wrote for Isaac Hadjar, and that was enough to cause damage to the car and crab around for the rest of the lap. But I believe, Rosanna, he has made it back to the pits now.
Yeah, he made his way gingerly down the pit lane. The mechanics were there to greet him and popped him up onto the skateboards, wheeled him back into the garage, and now they're at the rear end of the car, obviously sorting out the damage. But he is so tough on himself, like Scott was saying. We heard that in Australia, of course, making that mistake on the formation lap. But hopefully the people around him will help him shake it off so that come tomorrow's FP3 session, he's ready to go again. But you're right, this young generation of driver, they're very candid about how they're feeling, which is a great thing, given how important mindfulness is and mental health is. But you also worry that perhaps they take it too seriously sometimes. I know it's a serious sport, but I hope there are people around him to make him feel all right, because calling yourself stupid, sometimes I call myself stupid, Harry, but, sometimes that's warranted.
Never, Rosanna. Don't do yourself down like that.
Thanks, mate. Thank you.
There you go. 8 minutes and 3 seconds remaining of free practice to Isaac Hadjar, with a second incident in this practice session, has made it back to the pits. We have got the majority of the field out on the circuit at the moment, with the exception of Piastri, Hadjar and Lance Stroll. Franco Colapinto is the next one to cross the line in his Alpine, in his second race back in Formula One, his second race for the Alpine team, having replaced Jack Doohan last week. And we have a car off the circuit. It is Max Verstappen.
The cars are going in reverse.
So that looks like Max Verstappen down at Mirabeau, trying to reverse it, and he has got it in reverse now. That yellow flag was a bit delayed coming out for the Red Bull that was stopped in the runoff area, but he has got that in reverse and back on track now.
It's been a tricky session for Verstappen, for Red Bull in general. Tsunoda's right there with him, 0.04 of a second slower than Verstappen, which Tsunoda will be thrilled with if they weren't in 10th and 11th place. And we've heard complaints about upshifts, visor tear-offs not being quite good enough, and we are seeing him bail out of the corner. A little bit too much speed in, coming into Mirabeau, little lock up, and then just decides better to try and engage reverse eventually, and then risk just running into the wall. But it's not been a great session for Red Bull. The pace isn't there. It's not been clean. Again, they've got a lot of homework to do overnight to get this ready for FP3 and then, of course, qualifying.
Max Verstappen then back on his way around after having an off in Mirabeau. Charles Leclerc, though, still quickest of them all in that Ferrari, a 1:11.355, 38 thousandths of a second clear of Oscar Piastri. The sound you're hearing at the moment is George Russell in the Mercedes, making his way through the right-hander of Portier. Has enjoyed his best start to any season so far in Formula One, has reached the top 5 in every qualifying so far. and was rather left frustrated last week at Oscar Piastri in his early braking, which rather prevented Russell from making the most of his good start. Got boxed in on the inside of Tamburello, and Russell could do nothing about it except his fate was Verstappen sweeping round the outside of both of them. But George Russell really has had a brilliant year. He's really stepped up, I think, into that team leader role vacated by Lewis Hamilton. It's the last year of his contract as well, isn't it, for George Russell?
He had a pretty good year last year, to be fair, Harry.
He did, but this was the year where Lewis Hamilton is gone, and George Russell has to make him the name in that team now, right? And with Kimi Antonelli coming in, lauded as the next Verstappen and very much Toto's young talent, well, that applies a lot of the pressure on Russell.
Well, the only way he's going to lose that drive is if Max Verstappen decides to leave Red Bull. That's the only possibility. Other than that, Russell's locked in at Mercedes for sure for a new contract, but Toto Wolff's just waiting to do that deal until he knows absolutely that Verstappen's not leaving Red Bull.
The suggestion from Wolff today, because he has been asked about it here in Monaco, is that they won't let it drag on as long as last year with Antonelli, for example. We all knew months before it was announced that he would be replacing Lewis Hamilton, but they waited until the Italian Grand Prix weekend in September. Toto says that they won't wait that long for George, but to Andrew's point about Max Verstappen, if what we understand to be the case with Verstappen's contract is correct and he has an exit clause or not that's valid up until the summer break, they won't need to wait until September because they'll have their answer by the time we all go away on holiday in August.
Well, I also wonder what Silverstone, 4 races time, could be a nice place.
I'd be surprised if they leave it as long as whether Max is 100% available or unavailable, but you can't rule it out because we just don't know in Wolff's heart of hearts whether he just can't bring himself to close the door.
It go.
Exactly, but Russell's absolutely deserving of a new deal. I know that from his side he definitely wants it, and I think Mercedes absolutely wants to stay with him, but when there is a driver like Max Verstappen theoretically available, just don't close that door until you absolutely have to.
Is there still any fuel in the fire that Max Verstappen could end up having a year off Formula One?
He's ruled that out himself. He's got no interest in entertaining it. As we've seen with Max doing runs on the Nordschleife in GT cars, Max just wants to drive, and the ideal thing for him is obviously driving F1 cars for a little bit longer. I still think we might see him call time on his F1 career earlier than others maybe expect, because I think he does want to go and do other big races while he still feels like he's more in his prime, but I think that's a long way off.
Well, that story continues to rumble on in the background, just a few minutes away from this session concluded. A couple of notices from the FIA. Incident involving Sonoda will be investigated after the session. That's a yellow flag infringement, so normally they are pretty black and white, so might be a bit of pain coming Yuki Tsunoda's way if he hasn't eased off enough under yellow flag conditions. And earlier on we had a red flag infringement as well for Ollie Behrman, which is being investigated after the race, after this session I should say, so we'll see if anything comes from that and keep you updated. But some long runs making their way out into the circuit at the moment with just less than 2 minutes and 23, 22, 21 seconds remaining.
I know that we're seeing the long runs now, and we've seen so much qualifying work done for so long, and all those caveats we talked about earlier, but I'm so fascinated by the makeup of the top 10, top 12. And I suspect we're going to see an awful lot more single lap work, obviously in FP3 ahead of qualifying. But obviously, while qualifying is a big spectacle here, and everybody comes to see the cars absolutely up close on the limit, what everybody's really in Monaco for isn't the glitz, isn't the glamour, it isn't for everything up to the wall millimetres apart. It's for a trip to Long Run Corner and Andrew Benson's long run analysis.
Long Run Corner with Andrew Benson.
That was smooth, Scott. I thought you weren't going there, and then suddenly there you were.
I gave it my best shot.
So we don't have a lot of data. It's a confusing picture because there's been stoppages and Hadjar hitting the wall a million times and so on and so forth. What I can tell you, and what's made it even more confusing, is that Charles Leclerc, annoyingly the fastest driver on the track, is the only person doing his long run on the hard tyre, but he's absolutely flying. He's way quicker than anybody else, 6/10 quicker than anybody else on average. Everyone else is on the mediums, Oscar Piastri's only done one lap, but that one lap is a lot quicker than anybody else's average at 1 minute 14.5. Lando Norris has done 5 laps, 1 minute 14.7. No one else is in the game.
Wow. Thank you very much, Andrew Benson. Where has that come from for Charles Leclerc? We know the track is ramping up. We don't always know the fuel loads. We've got lots of, well, all 3 different compound of tyre being used throughout this session. But for Charles Leclerc, the raw pace seems to be there.
It's obviously such a small sample set, but the thing that I would say would leave a Ferrari fan encouraged right now is that while the one-lap pace could be explained away by fuel loads and engine modes and whatnot, maybe engine mode doesn't come into it quite so much when they're trying to get an accurate picture long-run-wise. They might still be showing a little bit more than what the others are doing, but how many times this season, going back to all of that, the narrative about McLaren versus Red Bull, have we heard people like Andrea Stella say McLaren maybe show a little bit more on Friday? Well, if McLaren are showing what they're capable of, this is looking very good for Ferrari.
Certainly is. Checkered flag out. That is free practice 2. Done and dusted. Friday's Formula 1 running comes to a close, and it's Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari quickest with a 1:11.355, less than a tenth separating him and Oscar Piastri, championship leader, in the McLaren in second. Lewis Hamilton also running well too, up inside that top 3. Lando Norris 4th. Liam Lawson with a good lap up in 5th. Hadjar was right there with him too, is 6th. Hadjar with 2 big crashes in this session. Alonso, Albon, Antonelli, Max Verstappen is the top 10, with Yuki Tsunoda right behind him. George Russell 12th, ahead of Carlos Sainz. Gabriel Bortoletto 14th, ahead of Oliver Behrman. Hulkenberg, Gasly, Stroll, Ocon and Franco Colapinto, the 20 drivers to make up that session. And well, Rosanna Tennant, there's going to be a lot of work going on overnight, but Ferrari, well, can you see inside the garage? Are there any smiles on their faces?
Well, I'm a little bit far down because I'm currently watching Isaac Hadjar's car being worked on by the Racing Bulls.
No smiles there.
No, they are getting to it. The car is up on the highest jacks. They're working on it. It's totally being sort of stripped down almost. But if I squint, can I see smiles on the Ferrari team's faces? Maybe a little bit more, a little bit happier than we were expecting. And as you've been saying during the coverage, Charles Leclerc was so negative coming into this weekend. So hopefully that has cheered him on. But as we've seen, Harry, this circuit bites. Even the most experienced drivers can come a cropper here, so it's full attack but full concentration. As I look above, there are some clouds looming, so not sure. It's the kind of characteristic of Monaco, isn't it? It can be really sunny and then suddenly the clouds can appear, so could weather also play a part across the weekend? We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, it can quickly change, can't it? And the clouds roll in over the hills as the practice starts get underway. Of course, cannot do those from the pit lane, far too narrow, so we do them at the end of these practice sessions. Scott Mitchell-Marr, your biggest takeaways from Friday's running in Monaco?
I think Leclerc was wrong to be so pessimistic about his chances for this weekend. It's certainly looking a lot better. And I think it's Red Bull that has the most work to do of the leading teams. Now, we've seen it before, they can turn it around, but not in a happy place, 7/10 of a second off the pace. It's Ferrari versus McLaren at the moment, which has a nice old school ring to it, because we haven't obviously got there in the Constructors' Championship towards the end of last season, but Ferrari's just not been in the picture so far this year, so it's a fascinating development so far.
We like an old school feel. I think I said that word about 1 million times last week in Imola, an old school track, but we do come in the 75th year of Formula 1 to Monte Carlo, one of only 4 tracks from 1950 in that first official Formula 1 championship season to remain, along with Silverstone, Spa, Belgium, and Italy in Monza. But at the end of FP2, Charles Leclerc, quickest, 38 thousandths of a second, splitting him and Piastri, with Lewis Hamilton inside the top 3. We will be back for free practice 3 on Saturday. We'll be on Sports Extra 2 from that, from 25 past 11, ahead of 11:30 green light. The all-important qualifying, not to be missed on that front. Again, on Sports Extra 2, we'll be building up from 2:55 ahead of a 3 o'clock start on that one back in the UK. And the race you'll be able to hear on 5 Live in full, be on air from 2 o'clock on Sunday for that one. If you're looking for more Formula 1 action as well, to keep you busy until tomorrow. You can listen to our Checkered Flag preview show with myself, Rosanna Tennant, and Jolyon Palmer, previewing the weekend and discussing all, including hearing from Oscar Piastri and that interview that has blown the paddock from top to tail. Everyone's talking about it. It's Andrew Benson's Oscar Piastri sit down. And equally, I think my Oliver Bearman interview has also made quite the impact too. So I quite enjoyed that one, catching up with rookie Ollie Bearman throughout the year, and had our second catch-up there. But I think all I have to say is thank you very much to Rosanna Tennant down in the pits. Thank you to Andrew Benson, to Scott Mitchell-Mann from the race. Appreciate you taking your time. And with that, I think we'll hand you back to a bit of cricket action with Kevin Howes and the team.
Thank you. They always leave you wanting more, don't they, the team there? Particularly, if I may say so, for the producer, just a little bit more of the Eagles singing The Long Run as well. Terrific stuff. Many thanks. We look forward to more from the team over the weekend. But back to the cricket. We've got a good hour and a half, maybe 2 hours left of this opening day of matches.